You can argue whether one is good or bad or right or wrong. I think they're both needed. I think a balance between masculine and feminine is always needed. And so
Yeah.
I think that when we demonize one or the other, we all miss a bigger picture.
Right. Okay, I'm joined today by Nicholas Pereira, and I thank you so much for coming on Genuine Collectives. So we're going to talk a little bit about um, the state of dating, the state of manship, and
Manship.
all things. We'll get into it a little bit because I've got so much to dig into with you. But first, if you want to just give everybody a little bit of the elevator pitch on who you are and what your claim to fame
Yeah, sure. My claim to fame is I am
is.
Nakula Das, and I help men master their sexual energy to become powerhouses both in and outside the bedroom and unleash their masculine leadership.
Yeah,
That's my claim
it's
to fame.
and it is such a good claim to fame. One of the things that I say really is, well, there's that saying, I forget who it was, about if you want endless repetition, date a bunch of different people. If you want infinite variety, date one. And it is because you're constantly like reinventing the relationship, reinventing yourselves,
Yeah,
and getting to a connection level that can't be matched when you are dating a bunch of different people. And
yeah,
yeah, I think it is truly one of the things that I find is that there is men really are having a hard time getting vulnerable, and I find that with that vulnerability comes intimacy, comes this union that is just like a bond that is impenetrable.
yeah. Well, vulnerability is excuse me, is totally intimacy,
Hmm.
because intimacy, you can't separate the two in my mind.
Yeah.
You're The more vulnerable you are, the more intimate you are. And also,
Hmm.
when it comes to intimacy, and especially when it comes into the realms of sex, you're getting into the most vulnerable places a person can get, where all their inhibitions are left to the wind, all the masks and proper greetings that we put on go all out the window, and you are just
Hmm.
like you're kind of at one of your rawest selves. And so I
Hmm.
think that the more that we can become vulnerable, the more life and all of its doors open up, and always.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's so true. So, I have been cultivating this YouTube channel for a couple of years, and I listen to podcasts like The Plane is Going Down. I don't watch like normal TV. I'm just a podcastaholic, and it's now that I found Podcast World, I'm addicted. It's just
You're
the place
hooked.
to be. I'm hooked. So and I funny, I don't know sometimes, and what I'll do is I had a job that was so boring, I would listen to podcasts just to stay awake, and I would write down things that were interesting to me in podcasting, and sometimes I don't know where I got the information. But one of the things, and I did a little short on this one, was the five insecurities all men have, and I just want to touch on these because I find this to be true when it comes to me navigating the dating world. So number one, to be perceived as weak emotionally. Number two, seen as inadequate. Number three, not being good in bed. Number four, not having the right body type. And number five, being seen as a coward. So those were the five things that men need to feel complete. And I will have to say that I recognize. I think men have been body shamed. Men have been masculine shamed, and I think that a lot of them don't feel like they're coming to the table with all those five things in check. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, can you so hold on. Coward, being perceived as a coward. Can you repeat them?
Um, so yeah, so being perceived as weak emotionally.
Okay, maybe we can go through them one at a time.
Sure.
Weak
Okay.
emotionally.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So it's a man's natural instinct to want to provide, protect, and produce. That's our psychological drive. I was
Yeah.
with a buddy yesterday. No, just a few days ago, we were at a Christmas party, and we were both just like, we just feel better when we're working. I'm like, I feel better
Yeah.
when I'm working. I feel better about myself when I'm working. I feel better when I'm being successful at what I do.
Yeah.
And so it's part of our drive to do that. So if we have a self image of ourselves that's like, I'm a coward in some way, which probably, at least I do, I have that. There's certain aspects in my life I'm like, oh, I like to knock that guy out, but I didn't. Or, and there's for a man, that's like in a very aggressive way of
Hmm.
seeing like a perceived cowardness, but at the same time, it's like it's our nature, right?
Right.
So I think that that insecurity men have, of course, we all have insecurities. And I think that when you say that most men have it, yeah, you're right, because
Yeah.
20, only about 20% of the men will carry like will do the work on themselves
Mhm.
to develop into a man that has insecurities, but's cool with it. He's come to terms
Right.
with it. He's all right.
Right.
His insecurities are now like just part of his personality, right?
Right.
And so it's very rare. Like what when you're describing a man without those insecurities, you're looking
Mm.
for a diamond in the rough. They do exist, but
Mhm.
it's unreasonable to actually think that that would be a common thing.
Right. So being perceived as weak emotionally, seen as inadequate, not being good in bed, which honestly, I don't envy men in having to navigate that world.
Well,
Not
yeah,
having
and
the right.
a man's his ego. So I help men in bedroom performance, as part of what I do, and
Mhm.
largely because a man's bedroom performance and things that his ego is tied into sex much more than I think a woman's.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
his definition of himself and what happens in his sexual life is
Yeah.
a huge factor on his overall self-image and how what he feels he deserves as a man.
Yeah.
So as a man, it's a basic instinct to want to please a woman.
Mhm.
And so if a man feels inadequate in that area, for sure that's going to come up in his psychology. It's going to come up in the way he approaches a woman, how
Yeah.
he leads her or chooses not to lead her. Um,
Right.
and again, it takes a rare man to actually develop himself into somebody who would basically master that within himself. Like I work with I help men master their sexual energy. I help men with bedroom performance, non-ejaculatory sex, be able to last as long as they want through all
Mhm.
these techniques. um most men will never invest in themselves in that kind of way, and it's
So
unfortunate they should.
this is a terrible thing I'm going to say, but I'm
Yeah.
horrible. So if you have any of your clients that are like in their maybe late 50s, early 60s and are single,
Send them your way. I could
that's
you know
right.
what? You're not the first woman who said to me, "You need to start a dating service so when
Yeah.
guys come out of your school or your
Yeah.
trainings, you're like, okay, this one's single, let's all right." But I'll tell you, like, and again, I think, and I guess the point I'm making with these five insecurities is, yeah, to me, I'm in total agreement.
Hmm.
Absolutely, you will find that everywhere. That's common. If you're a woman who wants a guy that doesn't have that, uh, you're looking for the 10, you're looking for the top 20%
Yeah.
of
I,
men. So you're
I think
talking about a much rarer find.
I don't think you'll even find it. I think they're all there. It's you're right. It's how you manage these insecurities and how you can
Yeah,
embrace them
yeah, they're
and
there.
have them be part of your personality and walk with them and
Yeah,
own them.
own
Um,
them.
so that's for me too. I'm going to delve a little bit into. I don't know how your service works, but I know for me, if I'm not there is times when I don't feel like I am owning my sexuality, owning me, and I can tell the difference in the way I'm perceived. I can
Mhm.
tell the difference in the way I perceive myself. And it is crazy that my morning meditation, where I do my positive affirmations and stuff, that it carries with me, and I couldn't be who I am without that. So is it the same kind of thing? Like really, just your work that you do? Is it just empowering? Is it just teaching someone how to embrace every aspect of them, the dark, the light, the shadows, the good stuff, the bad stuff, and own it?
Um, that's a large part of what part of the process I use is called sexual alchemy. Sexual
Hmm.
alchemy is alchemy in its original, kind of how it's presented in the world is turning, lead into gold.
Mhm.
Sexual alchemy is turning your sexual drive into fuel for success in whatever you determine success to be. So
Mhm.
there's a whole process I help with guys to help them get very clear on their vision, very clear on who they see themselves to be
Mhm.
naturally, not trying to impose this like, oh, I should be this guy or I should be that guy. Who are you? I think one of the most masculine, masculinity overall is defined as penetrative, visionary, get things done, taking initiative. And both men and women, we embody masculine and feminine energy. So
Mhm.
the masculine energy, when it's dominant in a man, is he's going to be an action taker. He's going to be taking initiative. He's going to be leading things. He's going to be out there living his goals and dreams or creating his world.
Mhm.
And that in itself, first of all, helps him manage all those insecurities.
Yeah. So
Those insecurities are largely prevalent in a man when he's not living a
yeah,
life of purpose, when he's not
right.
on purpose and doing his duty. And men, we're driven by duty. And our emotional need is respect. There's that saying,
Yeah.
women need love, but men need respect.
Yeah,
And
that's
again,
so true.
right? And so again,
Mhm.
it ties into sexual energy. So my work is helping men become very aware of how their sexual urges, desires, energy means the motivation you get from sex. Like a man will tell you he'll be dead tired, he's ready to go to sleep, and then she sends him the text 2 in the morning, I'm awake. All of a sudden, that guy's like, yeah, I'll pull an all nighter, no problem. When I'm there, right? She gives you the little
Yeah.
butt wiggle, and you're like, yeah, yeah, it's 2 in the morning, but I'm cool. It doesn't matter that I have, an interview in the morning. That don't matter. We're
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
this, right? Because that is a man's desire for sex. It's so strong. And so once you really understand that, and once a man understands that, and this is what my work is first is understand what how this drives you. Now imagine you can harness that drive and that discipline to say, I'm going to go and have sex with this woman at 2 in the morning or have sex with my wife at 2 in the morning.
Mm,
And I'm still have the discipline to get up and to use that same drive
mm,
to go and into your work throughout the day
yeah.
because it's an energy source. And so most men only have one expression that's largely taught. And here's a major problem in our world today: pornography.
Mhm. I was gonna get into that, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, why you're seeing also a
Yeah.
lot of men feeling very insecure or seems out of
Mm,
touch with their masculinity is the over abuse, the overuse of pornography and masturbation. And so this is like, this is where, my haters start coming around. No, it's normal and you got to jerk off.
no,
It's bullshit. Okay.
yeah.
As men, we should be dominant. And dominant doesn't mean dominating others. That's the misinterpretation. That's
Mm,
the whole, oh, that's toxic masculinity. You're right. If your domination is going towards
yes,
dominating others, you're right. It is toxic. I'm with you. And that's not a dominant man. That's a weak man that is trying to
right,
express himself as dominant.
right.
A man, the guys that come through my training and my understanding of masculine, the way I've been trained, is that a man is somebody who is mastered himself. He can
Yeah.
set his vision, he can build his life, he can go get it. He's a provider, a producer, and protector. And the more that he falls into that role and accepts that role, first of all, he gets the respect of people around him. And most
Mhm,
importantly, he develops in self respect. If somebody doesn't respect him, and he's developing in this way, he will either course correct that or get that person out of his life because he
mhm.
will not stand for that himself. And that self confidence, self respect makes him attractive. And
Yeah.
that's again, once again, how he gets rid of those insecurities. But again, it takes the rare man who's going to work on that and who's going to want to
Yeah.
understand. It's a top man. The guys who work with me are successful men.
Mm,
These guys are business owners. These guys are high level academia. These guys I've
yeah.
coached politicians. These guys are guys who want the best out of life, And that's generally what women are looking for because women are naturally attracted to a strong
Right.
provider, producer, and protector.
Well, and that goes back to the hard wiring you mentioned before. And that's what I feel is one of the things that is people aren't appreciating is the hard wiring. I'm kind of segueing a little bit, but when I happened to watch a video on penguins and the plight of the penguin reproductive cycle, and it's like those creatures go through hell to just have one little offspring make it to be
Yeah.
self-sufficient. And
Oh my
when you
gosh.
look at the animal world, there every other creature on the planet, that's it. Like that is why we're here. And it feels like the hardwiring of the human species. We are hardwired to do that, but for some reason that all fell apart. And
Yeah.
there,
Well, the
people
human,
may not
yeah,
people may not agree with it, but I have to. A lot of discussion is now about the invention of the birth control pill and the sexual revolution being part of the beginnings of that crumbling of
yeah. Well,
the family.
I think when you acknowledge the biological aspect of sex, sex is the purpose of sex is reproduction.
Right.
The purpose of sex is a biological hardwired drive in us to reproduce. Now, the human form of life, and this is where it gets a bit esoteric, a bit spiritual, is that the human form of life seems to have this ability to be conscious of it and to
Mhm.
participate consciously in the process, which also gives us responsibility to a certain degree over the process. And the beauty, and this is again, this goes back to my work. So first is understand it. First, you have to understand just the how my sexual energy drives me. Then become aware of it. And there's a famous book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon
Mhm.
Hill, famous author. Chapter 11 is called The Secrets of Sex Transmutation. My whole work is inspired by chapter 11, right? Like my everything that I do came from this knowledge of Napoleon Hill, which was that a man basically he says that a man until he can direct his sexual urges and drive on higher lines other than a physical expression of sex, he basically will not be in the top 20%.
Mhm.
He will be a common man because a common man is driven by his base desire only. An uncommon man is driven by purpose, which is
Mhm.
now starting to delve into the more subtle or spiritual aspects of life, which is what drives me mentally, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually.
Mhm.
And so, when a man, for my own journey in that, when I discovered that what really drives me, first of all, as a man, is legacy.
Yeah.
I, I don't have kids. My legacy is the work that I will do and the amount and the book of knowledge that I'm going to leave behind,
Mhm.
which is this
So
sexual
you're not
alchemy
going
and
to have
sexual process.
you
It's
don't
not
plan on having kids?
myself and my wife, we've talked about it. We said that we're open to the idea, but we've haven't had kids, and we still haven't acted upon having kids.
Yeah, yeah.
And we've never had I've never had the strong desire for kids
Me neither.
ever. Yeah.
It's a
Like,
job
I've
that
actually been like a hard no most of my
yeah,
life.
me
I
too.
would
You
say
know,
I'm open to the idea now.
I think for about 20 minutes once in my 20s in the springtime, I was like, maybe no. And,
Maybe it's not. Well, and that's
but
also people who are pursuing, there's a spiritual reason for that anyways, but people who
mhm,
are pursuing like deeper, higher knowledge, like we're all pursuing legacy in some way because it's a natural drive for us. We want to reproduce. It's a natural thing of an organism. We take
mm,
birth, we grow, we create some offsprings. For most people, that is creating children. For some
mhm,
people, it's creating children, businesses. For some people, it's creating organizations. We will create stuff.
mhm,
Sex is the physical act of creation. Creating things like a business or art is the mind's act of sex and
mhm,
creation. And serving others and knowing God is the soul's sex.
right,
It's non-physical though. It's not
right,
a physical sex. It's spiritual sex. And
right.
so that's the my work is helping guys understand that process and slowly rise up to being able to experience sex at all levels. So a sexual
Mhm.
alchemist is what I teach as part of the process, and then we have a leadership training where we work on communication skills and presentation skills and
Mhm.
influencing skills and
Wow.
organization skills and setting goals. We've got this entire 6 month training in which
Wow.
essentially we show a man how to be organized, how to be effective, how to make decisions, how to lead, how to master his sexual energy so he can get his workouts right, he can get his mind right. He's not
Wow.
distracted by that all day long. And that goes back to the pornography. Pornography is an attack
Mhm.
on masculinity. It takes our natural drive for sex and it makes it easy. And here's the one of the
Mm.
biggest challenges that men have in this day and age, and it's why you're also seeing so many men with those insecurities. Those insecurities are only are allowed to, they're all there. Every man
Mhm.
has those insecurities, I would say, to some level. The difference is how much it's fed. You need to feed those insecurities. For anything to grow, it needs to be fed, or it needs it needs an
Mhm.
environment to grow. The only reason those insecurities are heightened right now in men is because everything is so easy, and men have
Mhm.
therefore overall lost their sense of purpose. And that goes, you talked about the event of birth control, and so I
Mhm.
assume we're talking about the overall feminist movement and such.
Mhm.
And I'm not neither for nor against it, but like everything in this world, it's dual. Everything in this world has components of good and bad and right and wrong,
Right.
and so all movements have that as well. And the
And
feminist
it,
movement has some really great stuff, and the feminist movement has some
yes.
really nasty stuff coming out of it.
Right. And it feels like always when there's we're trying to course correct, we always the pendulum always swings too far, and I feel like that happened a little bit with the feminist movement, that it swung a little bit too far, and
Well,
it happens all the
unfortunately,
time. Everything when
yeah.
we're course correcting, it's like whoa, and then we go, yeah, hopefully we can steer back on course. But um, so the hard wiring thing, um, yeah, I find that um, in the dating arena, the masculinity arena, it's true that people aren't. I feel like men aren't bringing to the table what their hardwiring says they should bring, and they're not owning that.
Well, and
The
that's
providership
yeah.
and all that stuff. It is a hardwiring thing to be sure, and women aren't owning what they're supposed to bring to the table, and that I think that herein lies the problem.
Yeah, well, it's and again, it's both, right? Like it's both have to be educated on
Mm,
how this works, not just when we talk about, like when I talk about like sexual energy and masculine, feminine, I'm not talking always about a man and woman. I'm talking about qualities or energies that
mhm.
live within us.
Right.
A man, the masculine, um, have you ever heard of the seven hermetic principles?
Mhm,
Okay, so principle number 7 is gender,
mhm,
right? That's so this is very ancient knowledge that are universal principles. And one of the hermetic principles, and this is found in many different traditions in Radha and Krishna in the Hindus, and Jesus says, "I am the Alpha and the Omega." And the Taoists have their yin and yang.
mm,
This gender, there is masculine gender on all planes of existence, meaning the quality of gender isn't man woman. That's an aspect, and is like, okay, I am in a man's body and I have masculine qualities about me, but within me I have feminine qualities as well. So masculine qualities are like penetrative, leadership, getting things done, organized, stability. That's another thing, right? Like that those insecurities only breed when a man is like unstable in some way. He's out of control in some way. So
mhm,
then, these qualities, and a woman or a feminine energy, excuse me, would be the opposite. If man is stability, then a woman is the exact opposite. Maybe a bit chaotic, maybe unstable, a little bit like, "Whoa, I'm gonna do here, so I'm gonna go there," right? That type of thing, right? And that's cool because that's what a woman is,
mhm.
and what a feminine is. And so when you have strong stability and you have a woman expressing her craziness, as I'm gonna call it, but it's a woman, and that's what I crave as a man. Like I could
Right.
get so orderly, Like, if I'm left to my own, like, I would be militant about everything.
Yeah.
It's because I have a woman in my life that I have to chill out. That's the
Right.
blessing, right? In
Well,
the
that's the
sense of
compliment.
right, that's the compliment, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but the problem with the modern age is men are chilling out too much.
Mhm.
So they have fallen in their feminine, which is more stagnation. So
Mhm.
masculine left unchecked without the balance of the feminine becomes becomes raw dominance, run over everything to accomplish what you want, and just like, in like just that kind of like you lose a lot of empathy or compassion, right? And feminine left unchecked without the masculine can fall into chaos, total disorder, whimsical. Everything is, like we live generally in a feminist society right
Mhm.
now, feminine dominated energy. And because of that, because it's so feminine, even the men are feminine, that that's why we have a lot of chaos in our society, right? Because it's based upon feeling of like, oh, well, that person feels like a woman. So we're gonna acknowledge that person as a woman, and we can't and feeling becomes overtaken from fact or this
Mhm. Mhm.
form. So there's subtle and there's
Mhm.
form. When they're out of balance in either way, when you get the society that's overly masculine, you'll get that hard conservative, like, nobody move, blah blah blah. But you get like maybe like a Saudi Arabia or something like this,
Mhm.
right? You get like a Saudi. These are very hard masculine run nations.
Mhm.
The West is very right now feminine run,
Mhm.
and you can see that there seems to be extremes in both.
Mhm.
The balance is needed, right? Canada generally has been a very balanced country. I
Mm.
I personally think it's lost its balance now,
Yes.
um, big time. I think under the leadership of Trudeau, we've gone way, way, way to we're not
Yeah.
even liberal anymore. The Liberal Party is not.
Yeah.
They have the name liberal, but they don't embody the values. I'm actually talking about liberalism, which is kind of a
Mm.
balance between left and right. That's masculine, feminine. We should be conserving. We should have discipline, focus, goals, and structure, and personal responsibility and freedom. You run yourself, you run your family, you take responsibility, mixed with that compassion for service of others, making sure
Mm.
everyone is included, making sure we're taken care of. When one or the other gets out of balance, then what we get is the big polarization. And that's another
Mhm.
Hermetic principle, polarization.
Yeah.
So, pornography, to tie that back into pornography, is that it demasculates men. The more men are demasculated, the more that we
Yeah.
are essentially becoming feminine. And one way, guys, you can check in if you're feminine is, and this is your body insecurity piece, how much body fat are you carrying?
Well, I wanted to touch on that too because you had mentioned about, men becoming the best that they can be, and there's so few that want to do that. I find that's true in both sexes, in
Yeah,
genders, male and
sure.
female.
I
And
think
I
that's a
and
human
I
thing.
it is a human thing, and I can tell you I don't understand. Is it easier to not work out and sit on the sofa and watch, a sensationalistic TV and not participate?
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Well,
is it the
yeah.
best thing for you? Like, no. And so I feel like both genders are in that state, and very few people are really striving to be the best that they can be.
Yeah,
And
it's
yeah.
that's always been human history, right? Like, that's not just today, but in today's age, what we have is a large prevalent of it because of how convenient everything is. I can sit there and watch the show Vikings and in my mind get the sensation of being Ragnar
Mhm.
Lothbrok and slaying a bunch of guys at war and then going home and just, like, pounding his wife all night, and every guy is like, "Ah!" right? "Ah!" right? Like, Any guy who's still a guy and lets himself be a guy is like, hell yeah, that freaking sounds awesome because that plays to the raw animalistic
Yeah.
drive of us, right? Now, most of us in today's orderly world understand that that's not the way we do things, nor is it beneficial to do things anymore. We have higher intel. The way we do it now is I'll crush you in business, and
Mm.
we'll find men need to compete, but we will compete in higher ways. Um, and so I think that that drive there is within us all. Sorry, can you answer? I want to make sure I answer your question. What was the statement?
You pretty much did, yeah. That
Okay.
there's
Uh,
just that
yeah, so it's easier to watch
men and women.
Radnar Lothbrok do it than to
Mm,
go to the gym and suffer, years before you'll even look as half as good as Ragnar Lothbrok, right? And
it's
so
the
and
the
so
discipline part.
yeah, yeah, because it's the discipline,
Yeah,
and to get Ragnar's body, it's like, okay, unless, you're probably for the average guy to do that, you're looking at 5 years to 10 years. It's a lifestyle that you dedicate to. You change your eating habits, you have to change your
mm,
mindset, you have to change your schedule. That means you have to change who you're hanging out with. It means you making life changes to
yeah.
get that body. You're
And
making
that
life
brings me
changes.
it brings me back to point number 4, which was not having the right body type.
Okay.
So, or being seen as inadequate. So, there that brings me back to these 5 insecurities all men have, and owning that and making the best out of what you have. But I want to just I'm going to segue from that. But I feel, and I don't know what the stats are on this. There's a bunch of stats, but it feels like so few people are coupling up now. And oh, so the saying is, men dictate relationship, women dictate sex. And
Right.
so there is few men dictating relationship. And I don't know if it's the advent of the swipe left, swipe right. Back in my day, um, we didn't have the internet, and we went to dances. You went to church dances. You went to bars. You went
Yeah.
out to social events. And when I think back on it now, when you lived it, you didn't think of how much this took for a guy to do. But as some guy would see you from across the room, finally get himself maybe, I don't know, 2 gin and tonics in or something, enough nerve to come up and say, "Hey, do you want to dance?" But we don't, and I think that goes back to the hardwiring and that conquering that
Yeah.
I'll call it
It's part of the
animalistic kind of.
social skills.
Yeah.
As a
And
teenager, I used to go up to women and girls, well, girls at the time, right? To girls
yeah,
my
yeah,
own age at the time as
yeah.
teenager, and just try to talk to them just to get over the nerves of it. And I used to do this by myself.
There is some, and I don't remember who was doing this, and you maybe that's part of your program as well. But there was someone doing part of their teaching thing was that as part of the program you had to go out and get 50 women's phone numbers, and it was
Yeah.
just because
I don't yeah.
again, it's like learning how to reject the rejection thing.
Everything. There's so much to it.
Yeah,
Learning how to face your own nerves, learning how to
yeah,
handle rejection. I've had girls say no to me. I've had girls say, I'd be like, "Can I get your number?" "No, thanks." "Oh, okay, well,
hmm
thanks. I appreciate it." And then
and
you got to
it's
go back. This ties right back to the
yes,
beginning. And
yes,
you
yes.
don't go cry to your mommy. I'm sorry. You
No,
go
you
back
go
to
and do
your
it again.
boys, and your
Yeah,
boys razz you up a bit, but
yeah,
but you know that they love you, right? They're like,
yeah,
oh, they're laughing at you. You just got rejected
yeah, 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 yeah.
and this girl just said no to you. You got to go back with your tail tucked in between your knees. And you're like, oh man, she said no. And you got to feel that embarrassment and you got to feel
Yeah.
that rejection. You got to feel your boys razz you up a bit, but then also be like, yeah, oh, well. And then guess what? 3 minutes later, you're like, oh, look at her. All right, I'm back. I'm
Yes.
back. I'm back. Go get it. Go.
Well,
And guess who's there cheering you on? The same guys who are
yeah,
razzing you.
yeah.
The same guy because they're trying to toughen you up a bit. They're not
Right,
saying they're trying to say, hey, you're supposed to be a provider, protector, producer. They're not saying
right.
you don't have emotion. That's the misconception. They're saying,
Mhm.
"Hey, yeah, we get it, man. We get it. We all want to go cry to our mommy." And at the same time, when you're 40 and your family needs you to put food on the table,
Yeah.
and you know what? There's tough economic times, so we need you to get intellectually smart to grow a business instead of working for someone. We need you to step up in a way. Guess what? If you didn't have all those experiences and your
Yeah.
experience was swiping left and swiping right in
That
social
and
media, you don't have that same.
And
You
that's
don't
where we
have that
are.
same development. That's exactly
Mhm.
where we are, and that's a problem,
It is a huge
and
problem. I know
it's
there's studies on
yeah.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a total problem. It's a total
Yeah.
problem. And that's why I do teach with the guys that are working with me that are single specifically, and inside of my company I have a dating coach specifically, so I don't personally teach this aspect of it. I'm married, and so I only work with guys who are married for me or are in a relationship, and single guys who are in that world of, then I have a guy to
Mhm.
work with them. But I teach guys specifically about leadership skills so that they can wherever they're at, whether it's they're dating or whether they are leading a company or whether they now need to do things differently in their life to lead their family, to be a natural and effective leader. And I find
Mhm.
that men, when they learn leadership skills, all the rest of it falls into place.
Yeah.
It's
So
just like "Tup, tup, tup, tup."
we're, I know you've got some time constraints, and I don't want to keep you past that. You're going to send me all of your contact information, and I'll put that
Yeah.
down in the show notes because honestly, what you're providing is such a needed thing, and I can't imagine you're probably busier than you probably don't even need any more
We're
clients
growing. Yeah,
because
we've served over
yeah,
2,000 men in 3 years. And quite honestly, like I'm looking to add, a few multiple zeros behind that. Um
yeah,
and what I'd like to tell men, it goes back to that you were saying, like, guys don't like to reach out, right? And I
mhm,
get that because it's part of like our makeup to be like, shouldn't I have my shit together? But we also have to accept that we've lived in a world unconscious. Like, you can get, whether I personally think that there's an aspect of it that's being done on purpose. I do fully believe that we
yes,
are
I know, I
actually
agree, I agree,
psychologically being attacked as
I agree,
men. And I think the more men that
I agree.
realize this and recognize it, and you'll notice it's men that really kind of accept that who are first. See, I start to recognize, like, uh, I'm not a victim. I'm not going to say sit here at all and play victim at all in my life. I take 100% responsibility for the choices and the
Mhm,
decisions and everything I've made. I'm working on my body too. I'm working on my discipline too. I'm working on all those things, like every that my students are working on, right? It's
mhm,
so we're all in it. But the one thing that I recognize is, I'm like, you know what? I've been told that I've been misinformed about what my role is as a man.
mhm. I agree.
And
It starts
yeah,
there is a saying they call young boys that they call them dysfunctional females, and that goes down to that back when I was in school, the young boys were the hardest to control, but we ran around at recess. We had the social interactions. We had to navigate the play world. We had to negotiate. We were always in negotiate, whether it's playing or not. Then you'd come back in after you ran around for a half hour and you'd sit and you'd do your work. But now we don't have that negotiation. We don't have the play. We don't have the recreational activity at schools. So now they call them dysfunctional females because they diagnose them with ADHD, ADD, drug them down because young girls are way more compliant. They sit at their table, their desk, and they listen
yeah,
to
that's
what the
right.
teacher says. So they start very young at making young men into what they term as dysfunctional females.
All nefarious. I think there is some I think there is some manipulation,
Yeah.
definitely happening. I mean, I did a whole talk on it, and I've studied, aspects of psychological warfare that specifically use sex
Mm,
as psychological warfare. So there's a whole aspect. Military circles know this. Very high political leaders understand this, and they also understand how sex is goes right into how we vote, how what leader we choose, because it's
wow.
psychologically determining so much of what we're looking for in the world. Because again, one of our base drives is simply reproduction. Much of our
Right.
activity is based upon increasing our chances of reproduction. And once
Right.
we really understand this, we can harness it and use it consciously. And that's the gift of being human. You can do those things consciously where an animal can't. The
Right.
penguin has no choice. The penguin's going to do what
Yeah.
the penguin does, but the man does have a choice. And as
Right.
men, one thing that we have that's different than women is we don't have a menstrual cycle, so we can cultivate this over periods of time. Like, we don't have to deplete our energy. A
Right.
woman has no choice. Every month with her menstrual cycle, she will feel a deplete in that energy. And then she'll feel a rise when she's, like, oh, I'm ready to go. Right. A man could just be ready
Yeah.
to go 24/7.
And there's studies about women. And I think the hardwiring and the basic animal instincts of the human species is often overlooked, but there's studies certainly that say about a woman walks differently when she's actually ovulating and
Oh,
can
yeah.
be is fertile, and a man actually picks up on this. And this is I could tell, and I don't know why, but when I went to a bar, I could tell when I was ovulating because men used to hit on me more.
Yeah,
I swear to God.
100%. Just like women, so the process of semen retention, which is, what I talk lots about, right? Which doesn't mean for any man listening, doesn't mean you never ejaculate again,
Oh, right.
but the practice of semen retention, women can subtly pick up on it that this guy is potent, that this
Oh,
guy is
yeah.
full of sexual energy, no different than when a man and even makeup in it, it's all to bring the illusion of arousal, right? It's all about arousal,
Right.
right? Like
I
that
know.
that's
I
what
know.
makeup is
Yeah.
about, right?
Yep.
Makeup is about
Yep. Yep. Yep.
arousal, right?
Yep. And
Guys
what
want to wear
your face looks
shirts that
flushed and your lips are yep,
and
yep,
your
yep, yep,
lips are blush that's
yep,
because
yep,
that's the natural state you're in
yep.
when you're arousal.
Exactly.
So what we
I don't think
consider
anyone knows that.
beauty is essentially the most aroused person. What we
Yes.
consider attractive is the most aroused person. This is sexual alchemy. This is what I teach men to do, to essentially be horny but control it.
Yeah.
Be as horny as you need to be as a man, but
Yeah.
never let it dominate you. Once you let it dominate you, it'll become a
Yeah.
destructive force.
Yeah.
But as soon as you harness it and you dominate
Yeah.
it, it will take you to
Yep.
all of those
To levels.
insecurities.
Yep.
You'll
Yep.
you'll start to knock them off the plate
It'll take you
because
to levels that you couldn't even comprehend. I
yeah,
agree.
yeah, it'll take you to
Yep.
levels you can't comprehend, and it's why,
Yep.
again, if anybody doesn't know the book Think and Grow Rich, go read chapter 11. If you
Mhm.
read the whole book, but if you
Yeah.
want to just quickly listen to what I'm like, get an insight, you know, read chapter 11 or go to my YouTube channel because the first video is me quoting chapter 11.
Oh, awesome. Oh, I will. I'm going to do that. Well, I'll even link that down in the show notes as well.
Sounds good.
I have totally enjoyed. I've taken up more than your time than I was allotted. I totally enjoyed our conversation today, and hopefully we can do it again
Yeah,
in the
maybe
very
we'll
near
do a
future.
part two. It was
And
great.
part two, I think there should be definitely part two because I resonated with everything that you were saying there, and I think your work is so necessary right now. Yeah,
Thank you so
in a
much. I
big
really
way.
appreciate it. And I appreciate the
Thank you.
opportunity. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you so much for being on.
You're
Talk
welcome.
to you soon.
Bye.
Okay, bye.